Women's tennis stands on its own. Swiatek is critical with Sabalenka's battle of the sexes. IGA Swiatek, world number 2, thinks that women's tennis doesn't need to be compared with men's tennis. IGA Swiatek, world number 2 in WTA ranking, has been critical about the battle of the sexes between Aryna Sabalenka and Nick Kyrgios, that ended with Kyrgios defeating Sabalenka 6-3, 6-3, in a match that many saw as harmful to women's tennis and women's sports as a whole. The Polish players said that the match was unnecessary and that they don't need to compare to men's sports. I haven't watched it because I don't watch stuff like that. I think for sure it attracted a lot of attention. It was entertainment, but I wouldn't say that had anything to do with social change or any important topics. I think the name was just the same as the one from the Billie Jean King match in '73. That's it. There were no more similarities because I feel like women's tennis stands on its own right now, Swiatek said, claiming that we have so many great athletes and great stories to present, we don't necessarily need to compare to men's tennis. Honestly, there doesn't need to be any competition. IGA Swiatek is currently representing Poland in the United Cup, the only mixed-gender competition in the ATP and WTA circuits. Swiatek defeated Eva Liss and Hubert Hurkacz defeated Alexander Zverev to claim a 2-0 victory against Germany. Women's tennis stands on its own. A deeper look at Swiatek's critique of the modern battle of the sexes and what it reveals about the identity and future of women's sport. In late 2025, a much-publicized tennis exhibition match between Aryna Sabalenka and Nick Kyrgios took the spotlight once again to revive a concept stamped in sporting lore: the battle of the sexes. Marketed on the legacy of Billie Jean King's iconic 1973 triumph over Bobby Riggs, the Dubai Showdown drew global attention, headlines, and social media buzz as fans digested yet another gender-based spectacle. However, in the midst of the excitement, perhaps the most insightful voice on the matter came not from the event itself, but from one of the world's leading tennis artists, Poland's IGA Swiatek. Sky Sports. Swiatek, the world number 2 and one of the most accomplished players in the modern women's game, was unequivocal. She did not watch the exhibition, she did not feel it had anything to do with social progress, and above all, she maintained that women's tennis stands on its own. Sky Sports. A name with history, but not much else. Swiatek's critique begins with the name itself. The term battle of the sexes evokes memories not of athletic gimmicks, but of a cultural battle, a moment when women's tennis was thrust into the center of the struggle for wider respect and equality. Billie Jean King's win in 1973 was not just a sporting result, it was a seismic event that gave legitimacy to professional women's tennis and contributed to the broader movement for gender equity in sport. Today, Swiatek points out, the name may be shared, but the meaning does not. Mundo Deportivo. The modern exhibition, in contrast, was structured for entertainment, adjusted rules, modified court dimensions, and a format designed as much for spectacle as sport. Sabalenka, the WTA number 1, faced Kyrgios, a former top 10 ATP player who has battled injuries and a softening competitive edge. While fans tuned in, the substance of the match was far from the rich layers of political and social change that surrounded the original. Swiatek's view, echoed by many in the tennis community, was that this was media circus rather than meaningful athletics. Be in sports. Tennis without comparison. Swiatek's main point was simple yet profound. Women's tennis does not need comparison to the men's game to justify its value. The sport thrives through its own stories, rivalries, athleticism, and personalities. From Serena Williams' transcendent impact, through the recent flourishing rivalries among Swiatek, Sabalenka, and Coco Gauff, to the depth of competition across the WTA Tour, today's women's tennis is rich with narratives that require no external benchmark. The independent. Indeed, Swiatek stressed that the WTA has so many great athletes and great stories to present. The idea that women's sport needs a novelty match against men to attract attention is, in her view, a disservice to the beauty, intensity, and global following the women's game already enjoys. Sky Sports. The United Cup, a better model for integration. Rather than staging direct gender matchups as competitive statements, Swiatek endorsed the Mixed-Gender United Cup as a more constructive way to celebrate tennis. This team competition features men's and women's singles alongside mixed doubles, allowing fans to enjoy both spheres of the sport in collaborative harmony, not in divisive comparison. Swiatek described the United Cup as a platform that brings tennis all together, appealing to fans of both WTA and ATP while showcasing the sport's varied dynamics. Sky Sports. This position underscores a broader philosophy. Coexistence and integrated celebration of excellence are more meaningful than staged contests designed to pit genders against one another. Mixed doubles, mixed team events, and integrated narratives allow fans to appreciate the strengths of every athlete without distorting or oversimplifying those strengths through contrived matches. Why Swiatek's stance matters. Swiatek's words resonate beyond tennis. They touch a nerve in the broader athletic world, where women's sport constantly grapples with the tension between seeking equal recognition and resisting the mindset that male comparison equals validation. 1. Affirming the value of women's sport. When Swiatek declares that women's tennis stands on its own, she's rejecting a historical bias, that women must be measured by men's standards to be deemed mainstream or legitimate. This pushback challenges audiences to value excellence wherever it appears, not just where it mirrors the men's game. 2. Rejecting gimmicks for growth. The Sabalenka-Kyrgios match was entertaining and undoubtedly profitable. But Swiatek's point is that entertainment alone doesn't equate to progress. True growth for women's sports comes through investment in competition, narrative depth, and shared platforms, not through spectacle masquerading as equality. 3. Shifting the narrative. The global tennis audience now follows stars like Swiatek, Sabalenka, Goff, and others with fervor that once was rarer for women's tennis. Their athletic accomplishments, rivalries, and personalities fill arenas and screens globally. This narrative richness allows women's tennis to attract attention for itself, without needing the crutch of gender comparison. The counterpoint: entertainment or empowerment. Not everyone saw the Sabalenka versus Kyrgios match as useless or harmful. Sabalenka herself defended the event, framing it as a new way of showcasing skill and drawing eyes to the sport. Some observers argue that such high-profile exhibitions can introduce tennis to audiences who might not otherwise tune in, thus expanding the sport's reach. New York Post. This raises an important question: can entertainment and progress coexist? And if so, at what cost? For some, the answer lies in balance, using entertainment to draw attention, while simultaneously investing in authentic competition that highlights athletic achievements. Others argue, like Swiatek, that when entertainment overshadows substance,